Alright, so this is how I make my masks, just in case anybody cares. I made a crappy pattern just out of a Kong advertisement. It's just like a nice little stiff paper. The just basics are you need this to be wide enough that you're getting good contact with your cheeks, and you want it long enough that you can have a good set of pleats. For me, that meant about 7.5 inches wide and 10 inches long. And then I made a little kind of swoop at the top so that I can fold that over and make a channel for a nose wire. If you don't have glasses, you probably don't necessarily need to do that, but it does cut down on air gapping around your face to get a better fit. The main goal of these masks are to keep germs in rather than keeping germs out, because really this is a public health issue, not necessarily a personal health issue, but if you don't want to fiddle around with doing that, you can just do it flat. So I already cut out my fun fabric, and this is just a cotton muslin. It has a really nice tight weave, so it reduces the amount of particles that can come through it. Obviously, it's not going to have the same impact as an intentional, designed surgical face mask, but it's good enough for my purposes. To start with, I want to fold over and make my little hem top and bottom. It is a lot easier to get a narrow hem if you happen to have a knitting needle or a skewer, something of that nature. I like to start by just running my iron quickly over the whole thing just to get it warmed up. The fabric moves a little bit better in my opinion with that. And then I use that knitting needle as just a little bit of reinforcement when I'm rolling that hem. Sneak the needle out. Sorry, my hands are going to be totally in the way for a lot of this. Just be really, really careful when you're doing this kind of trade-off that you don't burn your fingers. Especially if you have your iron set to steam. Even if you're not touching your iron, you could potentially steam your fingers, and that's not fun. So iron that. You can see it's a nice little fold over. I do the same with my little side spots. Now again, since this is going to create a channel, it's going to be folded over another time when we're actually sewing. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the neatest, most beautiful job. Nobody's going to super inspect your face mask, because ideally they should be at proper social distance, right? But I get that top rolled over. Now with making that channel, this top bit is going to be folded over again, so I'm not going to double roll it, but since these two sides are not going to be fully folded over in our sewing itself, I'm going to roll them now just to make a more completed little hem there. So roll it over. Another quick iron. It's okay if it wants to kind of untuck. As far as fabric choice, again, I recommend doing a cotton. The nice thing is you know that you can wash the bananas out of it and still have a solid material there. It also tends to have a nice tight weave. I would definitely stay away from anything that's a looser or very stretchy. All right, so that's kind of how my top is going to be until I actually sew it down. And then same thing for the bottom. You want to make sure that you're keeping everything flat from your top to bottom. Roll it over your skewer or needle, whatever you have. You can also use that to kind of shimmy down so you're not wasting as much of your length. Slide your needle out. Alright, now I'm going to roll this one more time and then I'm going to pop over and sew it on my machine. You can also do this by hand, but I am too lazy to demonstrate that for you because I have a sewing machine. But you can absolutely make one of these just by hand stitching if you have the time, energy to do it. Alright, so I'm going to go do that. So I stitched across the bottom. You want to make really sure that when you're doing that stitching, you're keeping close enough to this edge, the inside edge, as opposed to the outside, because that fold, we want to keep everything nice and stable. That's where you're going to get a little bit more durability. If you focus on stitching too close to this bottom edge, that fold you made could come undone. So really kind of hugging that edge there. And same for the top, making sure that you're hugging that kind of inside edge rather than the outside for stitching. I left this undone because again I'm going to be folding that over to make a little channel for a nose wire. Using a couple twist ties is sufficient in my unscientific testing. But from there, from having our nice little bottom and top hems, we want to get our pleats folded in. I've found that it's easier for me to keep a little guide nearby on what that spacing is. For me, it's roughly ½ inch is what I kind of settled on, but really I'm not an expert and you can kind of do whatever feels comfortable for you. Move that over so hopefully you can see it a little better. And for me, I just start folding. So fold back that top and fold it down so that you get a little channel. Again, you can use a little cheat sheet to try and keep them consistent. So you do want to try and make sure that you're even across the board. And once you get that kind of rough fold, go ahead and iron it. And then when you go to make your next one, picking up that whole piece, so you make sure that your new fold that you're making is just beneath the last one. So again, kind of checking against your little guide. Keep an eye side to side to make sure that you're staying roughly straight across. Again, Nobody's going to be getting close enough to inspect your mask to say, oh, you're a teeny tiny bit off. And the main purpose of these folds is to give a comfortable, good fit. It's not necessarily saying you need XYZ overlap in order to prevent infection. Because again, this is to keep your germs in, not to keep other germs out. So a good fit is the goal rather than an exact, precise construction. No offense, but your face is probably not an exact, precise construction. Alright, so I just kind of keep on going down the line. It's also helpful to pin as you go. For pinning, make sure that if you're going to be relying on pinning, you're pinning close enough to the center that when it comes time to sew this edge, you're not running into your pins, because it's kind of annoying to have to take them out while you're working, at least for me. So if you're going to pin your pleats, just give yourself plenty of elbow room so that you're not crowding this edge. And then I prefer to make sure that my pin heads are out, my needle points are in. I find that I stab myself less that way when I'm actually to the point of sewing it, but that can come down to personal preference. So just going down the line. All right, sorry, I'm bumping that camera a million times. All right, so it looks like I can just get a little bit more of a fold in. So one more good pleat there. This is for looking at mostly seams, but it's really helpful for making sure that the sides of your mask are roughly equal. So this edge is about 3.5 inches. Ooh, and I got this one on the first try, great. So more typically when I'm doing this, I'll find that one is just a smidge longer than the other, and then I'll kind of shimmy, take the pins out, wiggle around to get a better symmetric fit, but this one actually worked, so yay. So I'm just going to get that last one. Last one pinned. So now you can kind of see that mask structure. These edges are really ugly, but that's fine. And the top is a little ugly too, but again, that's going to be folded down, and we're going to take care of these edges. So now that I have my mask pleated the way I want to, I'm just going to trim up the edges a little bit. This one's not bad, but sometimes you'll have, say, one of your fabrics poking out a little bit farther than the other, lots of little loose strings, and you want to just trim it up so that you have one nice flat side. So same for the other side. This is more awkward trying to show a camera, but trimming this will make it easier to get a snug fit with your bias tape. So for bias tape, you can go with a couple different sizes. This is a wider double fold bias tape. Double fold meaning it's got one fold, two folds. And I'm going to be using that with this mask. also used narrow bias tape for one of my other ones. So it's personal preference and what you have on hand, because I'm working with basically leftovers from other projects. So I have this ridiculously bright tape to use. So we're going to use this on the edges and that real nice snug trim job that you did helps to make sure that you get everything tucked in as far as possible so that you're not missing any of your opportunity to protect that edge. You want to leave overhang on each side. I'm going to show you later where that comes in, but you want a good bit of that so that you can fold it over on one of our next steps. So a little overhang on each side. As I said, this is about, the edge of my mask is about 3.5 inches. My bias tape here is a little bit over 4.5, so that gives me a little overhang both sides, and I'm just going to kind of center it in terms of making sure overhang is top and bottom, and then pin that in place. So same thing other side. You may notice on your bias tape when you fold it, and this might not be very easy to see, usually one side hangs down a little bit lower than the other. You want that lower hanging side to be on kind of the back, the side that you're not stitching. That way you can be confident when you're doing your top stitching that you're hitting it on the other side too. That helps you get fairly close to that inside edge again without overshooting and not being able to grab both sides of the bias tape with one needle punch. So again, kind of centering it so that I have overhang on both sides. Making sure that's pinned. And then what I'm going to do is stitch this, then come back and tell you about getting the straps on here. Now, what I did for these other hems, and I didn't mention, is that I'm always back stitching. So you don't want to just stitch up to your edge and call it a day. By stitching up to it and then back stitching, you're giving a little bit more strength to that stress point and making it less likely that it's going to unravel during your aggressive washing. So I'm going to do that same thing on here and then come back. Alright, so I went ahead and sewed one of these on already just because. So with the choice of elastic, you have a couple options. You actually have a million options, but there's only two that I would recommend looking at. This is a narrow cotton elastic that's generally used for swimsuits. I think this one's a 1/4 inch, but it's flat, it's super easy to sew through, so attaching it is really easy. The width can be a little bit annoying in terms of comfort around the back of your ear, but it's soft, so that's nice. This is elastic cord, so it is nice and narrow, fits well behind your ear, but it's a little less soft, so it can be a little bit more pressure in one spot. Between the two, comfort-wise, it depends on what you want. The elastic cord is a little trickier to sew on because you can't just go right through it. There's a cord that's pretty thick. Your sewing machine or your hands are going to be a little sad with you. So if you're putting the flat cord on, and this one's been washed a couple times, so it's a little ratty, but you just line up the elastic, fold over, and stitch it down. You really want to reinforce this because there's going to be tension on it. But with the cord, you're going to do things a little differently. You can see where I put it through, fold over, and then wind that cord back around. And then to affix it, I'm not going straight through that cord because again, my sewing machine would protest. I'm doing a narrow zigzag stitch that's about the same width as the cord. So I'm just tucking into the very edge of it and hugging it to hold it in. So what that looks like in terms of getting this one ready, be folding over again, and then really being careful on my machine to line up, and maybe even using the hand wheel to put your first few stitches in, doing a zigzag stitch over this end. You can see it holds really well doing it that way. It's just kind of a pain in the butt. So if you're just getting into sewing, I'd just go with a flat elastic. It's going to be easier for you. But you can see that gives you a nice loop. As far as the length of elastic, that depends on how big your head is and how wide you made your mask. Again, I made mine about 7.5 inches. I end up using 7 inches of cord. That includes the little fold over. Your head might vary, so try out different stuff. Hold your mask up to your face without elastic and kind of measure to see what works for you. You want it to be a little bit stretched to have compression on the sides, but you don't want it cutting your ears off. So I'm going to go ahead and sew on the other strap. Alright, so now we have straps. I'm just going to re-iron this spot. I had that little hem. And then I'm making a channel for putting in a nose wire. So I'm just going to take that and fold it over. And just iron that down. Again, don't fry your fingers. Now, it's going to be easy to just tack down. Again, backstitch to reinforce that area. And we'll be right. So we have a little flap, so you can slide in a twist tie or something, some kind of wire to bend that nose down and help contour it. So we can take out all our pins. And there you have it. Nice, bright fun in a horrible, worldwide pandemic. Hopefully keep your germs in, keep the community a little bit safer. In terms of washing this, if you're going with a nice sturdy cotton, then you can wash it on hot. I did forget to mention you should pre-wash all of your fabric before you start cutting stuff out, just because we can see some shrinkage and that can make things look a little rough after the fact. But you shouldn't have to bleach the bananas out of this thing. It's enveloped virus that we're primarily worried about, so washing with a nice detergent should be completely sufficient. But there's one. If you have questions, hit me up. In any case, there you go.